Between 1765 and 1938, the British Empire extracted the modern equivalent of $45 trillion from India. Not through war, not through trade, but through a financial system engineered to drain a nation silently and systematically. And the most shocking part? For decades, the world was taught that Britain developed India. This is how the British Raj bankrupted one of the richest civilizations on earth. Before the British arrived, India was not a poor country. It was one of the wealthiest regions in the world, producing 1/4 of global GDP. The British takeover didn't start with a country. It started with a corporation, the British East India Company. After 1757, the company gained the right to collect taxes from Indians, a power that belonged only to governments. Suddenly, a foreign corporation was draining India's wealth and shipping it directly to London. This was the beginning of the drain of wealth. Its textiles dominated world markets. How exactly did the British drain India? They built a 4-part system designed for maximum extraction. 1. High cash taxes. Most Indians lived on farms and didn't use money. Taxes forced them to sell crops, dependency on cash, vulnerability. 2. Forced cash crops. Food crops were replaced with indigo, cotton, opium. These were valuable to Britain, not India. 3. Home charges. India was forced to pay for the British Army in India, British administration, British pensions, all paid with Indian taxes. 4. Fake trade surplus. Britain claimed India bought British goods. In reality, Britain paid for those exports with money it earlier took from India. Britain was buying Indian resources with Indian money. Its agriculture fed millions. Its scientific and mathematical advancements were centuries ahead. India wasn't developed by Britain. It was looted. From 1876 to 1900, over tens of millions of Indians died in famines. But here's the truth, no one is taught. These were not natural disasters. During famines, India continued exporting food to Britain. While millions starved, ships full of grain left Indian ports under armed guard. Why? Because stopping exports would cost Britain money. This was not mismanagement. It was economic brutality. Before British rule, India was the world's leading textile exporter. British manufacturers feared Indian competition. Their solution? Ban Indian textiles. Tax Indian weavers. Destroy Indian looms. Flood the market with cheap British cloth. India transformed from a global manufacturer to a raw material supplier to an importer of British goods. This was not industrialization. This was deindustrialization. We often hear, but Britain built railways in India. Yes, but the railways were designed to extract resources, not develop India. Routes connected, cotton fields, ports, coal mines, ports, wheat farms, ports. It was a conveyor belt of wealth, moving from Indian villages to British ships. India paid for the railways through taxes. Britain collected the profits. By 1947, when the British finally left, India's global GDP share had collapsed from 25%, 3%. Life expectancy fell to around 32. Literacy collapsed. Manufacturing collapsed. Wealth vanished. India wasn't underdeveloped. It was deliberately impoverished. The Raj didn't build India. It bled India. The economic systems created during colonialism did not disappear. They evolved into global trade structures, commodity price controls, debt regimes, financial institutions. Empires don't vanish. They adapt. Today, India is rising again. But understanding how its wealth was taken and how global inequality was engineered reveals a truth. The greatest economic crimes in history are not always committed with swords. Sometimes they're committed with ledgers. But to truly understand how the British Raj bankrupted India, we need to look beyond taxes and cash crops. Because the most powerful tools of extraction weren't always physical, they were financial, psychological, and structural. Britain didn't just drain India's wealth. It systematically dismantled the institutions that created Indian prosperity in the first place. 1. The collapse of Indian banking and credit networks. Before the Raj, India had one of the most sophisticated financial systems in the world. Village-level bankers, called shroffs and sahukas, ran microcredit networks that funded farmers, artisans, textile traders, small manufacturing hubs. Money moved fast, locally and efficiently. The British destroyed this by introducing strict European-style banking laws that outlawed traditional lending systems, restricted Indian lenders, centralised credit under British-controlled banks. Suddenly, access to capital, the lifeblood of an economy, shifted from Indians to British institutions. This meant Indian farmers couldn't get loans. Indian traders couldn't expand. Indian weavers couldn't buy raw material. Indian entrepreneurs were blocked from industrializing. India wasn't just being drained, it was being financially suffocated. 2. The tax system that forced Indians into debt. The British tax system was unlike anything India had ever seen. Taxes had to be paid in cash, on time, at fixed rates, even during droughts or floods. Failure to pay meant land seizure, jail time, forced labour, auctioning of entire villages. Millions of Indian farmers fell into cycle after cycle of debt, often owing money to British-supported landlords. Britain wasn't simply taxing India. It was weaponising debt to transfer land ownership from Indians to colonial elites. By the late 1800s, over 1/3 of Indian farmland had been seized. Millions of farmers became landless labourers. Rural India became trapped in generational poverty. This was not misfortune. This was economic architecture. 3. The destruction of Indian shipping and international trade. India was once a major maritime trading power. Its ships travelled from East Africa to Southeast Asia to the Persian Gulf. The British eliminated India's shipping industry through restrictive maritime laws, discriminatory port taxes, banning Indian-built ships from trade routes. Within decades, Indian shipyards were empty. British ships took over every commercial route. This collapsed coastal economies and wiped out thousands of merchant families. India didn't lose trade. It was cut off from the global market on purpose. 4. The bleeding of India's gold and silver reserves. Another hidden mechanism was bullion extraction. Whenever India ran a trade surplus, which was often, Britain forced India to ship its gold and silver reserves to London. This meant India could never accumulate capital, savings, or investment reserves. The economic effect was devastating. Currency shortages, deflation, collapse of local markets, wages decreasing for decades. The British economy grew, the Indian economy shrank, not because of productivity, but because of metal leaving the country. 5. How Britain broke India's scientific and educational backbone. Colonial rule didn't only attack India's wealth, it attacked its knowledge systems. The British replaced India's centuries-old education network with a system designed to create clerks for the British Empire, Indian schools teaching mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, philosophy, architecture were defunded or shut down. By 1900, literacy rates had collapsed, higher education was limited to elites, scientific institutions were gone. Skilled trades declined sharply. A population that once led the world in mathematics and metallurgy was turned into an uneducated labour pool for colonial administration. This wasn't accidental. It prevented India from rebuilding wealth or challenging British supremacy. 6. The psychological economy of empire. Perhaps the most subtle mechanism was psychological. For generations, Indians were told they were incapable of governing themselves. They were poor because of their own culture. Their industries failed because they were inferior. their society was backward, chaotic, uncivilized. This narrative wasn't true. It wasn't even consistent. It was propaganda that justified extraction. Because if India's poverty was India's fault, then Britain could pretend it wasn't responsible. The Raj drained India economically, but it also rewrote India's story. A story India is still rewriting today.